Hello, and welcome to the Heal Your Heart, Heal Your Life podcast, the podcast where we talk all things we've survived through, whether that be trauma, life lessons, and most importantly, how we've healed. In the hopes that if there's a listener out there somewhere going through the same thing and they're feeling lost on what they can do to heal their hearts, they can come to this podcast to hear inspiring stories from people who've lived through what they're going through. You are seen, you are heard, and you are loved here. And now, on to today's episode.
I hope this medicine finds you when you need it the most. My name is Kiara Jade. I am a relationship and couples coach. I am a podcast host. I am an author. I love all things relationships and relating. And yeah, I'll be your guide today on this solo cast about navigating heartbreak. So it's a big topic, navigating heartbreak. So whenever we go through heartbreak, this in itself is its own quantum leap portal journey, if you so choose it to be. Heartbreak can be devastating. Heartbreak can collapse a very, very big part of our being. It can shift our entire kind of trajectory of what we think we're on and where we think we're going. And in this way, it can be devastating, but in this way, it can also be very healing. And I have seen a lot of people just grow into such an interesting version of themselves after going through a heartbreak. And yeah, I just wanted to talk about that on this episode today to discuss, what can you do if you're currently going through a heartbreak in order to sit with those big feelings that come up and sit with your heart and your emotions and try and work on piecing yourself back together again. And what might that look like? And also what can come out of heartbreak and how we can go through these quantum leaps and what that might look like. Because again, so many topics in relationships is not really spoken about, or there's this shame around being broken up with, or, feeling like you failed at life because you failed this relationship. I've heard a lot of that talk lately. There's a lot of belief systems that pop up around these things that aren't necessarily true and aren't necessarily in our highest and best good to believe, but definitely are triggered when we go through something like this. So, yeah, here we are. I believe heartbreak is so potent that I would actually put it in the category of grief and loss. So, in a way, the person who you've broken your partnership with or they have broken up with you, it's like they have died in a way. They might still be alive, they might still be doing great, they might still be in your field, they might not be in your field anymore, but it's like the relationship you had with them and the version of them that you knew in that partnership has died because it's no longer there. It's gone. And maybe you go from texting every single day to suddenly, not speaking. And so I do believe that heartbreak is the first taste of grief and loss that a lot of us get in this life. Not always. Unfortunately, there's people who, death is thrust upon them very early on. But yeah, I feel like a lot of people who haven't really suffered grief and loss, uh, if you've been through a big heartbreak, you might have the ability to empathize with someone who's also grieving. And they say grief can be about anything. It can be about losing a job. It can be about losing a partner. It can be about like losing someone who has actually passed away, because anything that's a loss can bring up grief in us. And the way I see grief is that it's, all the love in our heart that we had for that person suddenly has nowhere to go, right? And it's like, what do we do with all the love we had for that person? And often that becomes sadness and it gets translated into this like devastation that they're no longer with us. And it's not a bad thing to have a big heart, but it does mean that you will need to look after yourself a little bit more than maybe the average person might. And I think when we go through breakup, I think our first way of like coping with it is usually to like numb it or distract ourselves or jump into the first new thing, jump on the apps, like let's find someone else to talk to like immediately. And because the pain is so strong that I just need that distraction, I need something to get me away from this pain like straight away. Maybe it's a drug, maybe it's a person, but they're functioning in the same way. They're distracting you from facing that pain because it can be overwhelming. It can be really hard to deal with this when it comes up. Like it's a lot of emotion. Even if you were the one who broke the partnership, you might still have pain around it. You might still have grief that needs to be had around it. It is an entire shift of your life. And it's so normal to go down those pathways of distraction. But I want to give you this episode as a gift of like, how else can we navigate heartbreak? How can we actually feel into the things we're going through instead of just jumping on an app, finding someone to get with in the next week because, that soothes the pain. Because even though it's soothing the pain still exists. And the pain might be suppressed for a little while, but it might come up at a later date. Because that's the thing about pain, it demands to be felt. And even when we're really good at suppressing it, I've talked about this before on the podcast, so apologies if it's a repeat, but I see heavy emotions or, sadness, anger, depression, whatever it is, devastation, grief, loss. I see it as a beach ball. And we're at the beach and we've got this beach ball. It's got the air in it. The air is that emotion. You're trying to push it under the water. You don't want to see that emotion. You don't want to have to deal with it. It's devastating. It's heartbreaking. It's hard. So you're pushing it under, you're pushing it under, you're pushing it under. Maybe you're on the apps and that pushes it under a little bit more. Maybe you're taking drugs and it pushes it under a little bit more. And what happens with that beach ball, right? It pops back up. The air is so strong, no matter how hard you push it down, it will pop back up. Whether it pops up behind you and it goes through your legs, or whether it pops up next to you, whether it pops up straight in your face, even though you were just trying to push it down from that exact angle. The air and the power of that emotion in that beach ball will find a way back to the surface, whether it's now, whether it's later. Because suppression of emotions is not clearing an emotion. The body remembers, the body knows, and things will come up. Sadness will come up. Tears with no really, where did this come from, will come up down the track. And I think that's just a normal part of the way society deals with this stuff is like, oh, I just got broken up with and it's leaving me feeling unwanted. So I'm going to go find a way to feel wanted to kind of prove that feeling wrong. And when we do these things, what we're missing is we're missing the gold that the breakup can teach us. So when the breakup happens, it's going to bring up a lot of wounding for us, right? A lot of rejection wounds, abandonment wounds, self-hate wounds, I'm not good enough wounds. Like all of this stuff is going to rise to the surface and be very, very present when it wasn't, say, the week before when you were still with that person. And all of those things always exist in you, right? Like you might be feeling really abandoned right now, but you still had that within you 2 weeks ago, even though your partner was there, but they were almost like a comfort blanket that was keeping it at bay. It would still come up, like maybe you had a friendship that went bad and you'd still feel a bit abandoned there, but you almost had your partner as like, oh, well, this is just going to soothe me in this period. I've had this friendship breakup. But I can just go back to my partner and they're going to look after me and it's going to be fine. Because it's like another way of me being like, well, I'm abandoned in this aspect, but I'm not in this aspect, so I'm safe. So often our partner will shield us in a way from a lot of things. And I think that's why people get so addicted to being in relationship is because you have a person to validate you 24/7, essentially. Like whenever you're going through something, you have someone to be in your corner, right? That you can call up and go, oh, this person, my boss treated me really shitty, like, and it really sucks and I'm having a bad day. And they're like, wow, your boss sounds like an asshole. Like you have that person to validate you. unless it is your relationship that, the issues are happening in, of course. And not all of us are lucky to have people who will validate us in our emotions, but our partner does become that kind of safety blanket for us. And when we're single again, you almost lose that safety blanket a little bit. Like, yeah, you might still have friends, you might have family, there's going to be people around you to support you, but it's almost different in a way because it's not like a 24/7 thing. They're not with you all the time, like, especially if you're living with someone, right? And this can be really scary and really hard because suddenly all these big, heavy emotions are coming up and you don't have your way of coping that you used to have, right? And this is where we get attracted to, the apps or the drugs or, whatever it is that's going to shift us out of that and distract us into something different. And I mean, it's valid. These emotions that are coming up are big and scary. Like, it's hard to sit with these things at times, but I'm going to challenge you to try and sit with this stuff a little bit more, sit in the stillness and see what comes up. Journal as much as you can during this period. There's going to be so much that comes up. Write poetry, whatever it is that you need to do to let these feelings out in a healthy way is going to soothe you, right? This is where artists kind of like become really creative, because they've got so much pain that they just need to release it in such a way that it is being felt and managed, but it's also being let go of at the same time. Because when we channel an emotion through art or words or whatever it is, we give it the space to be acknowledged, right? We're not suppressing anymore. It comes up, we feel heavy, and we channel it into a creative pursuit. We channel it into something and we keep going until we're done. Like, that poem might be 5 pages long, but if it needs 5 pages, it needs 5 pages, right? And that's the way our emotions generally function, is like, they demand to be felt, but once they've been felt, they lessen. And I think that's what people get so afraid of, is like, whoa, this abandonment wound is coming up in me. It feels fucking huge. And I'm scared I'm going to get stuck there. I'm scared if I'm going to feel into that, then I'm going to go on this downward spiral and I won't get out of it. And I mean, some people have the ability to pull themselves in and out a lot stronger than other people. And sometimes when we feel into this stuff, we can end up in these mental loops and these spirals of like, I am the worst. They've left me because I did something wrong or something like that. And that is the point. If you're on this mental loop and there is no lessening, and say it's been, I don't know, an hour, 2 hours, and you're still on this same mental loop, that is the point where you would ask for help, right? And if you have a history of depression, I would be like, if you're going to decide to feel into these emotions, I would make sure that you have that safety net of a therapist, of a coach, of a best friend, of a someone you can ring and go, the thoughts are all attacking me at once today. I need some support. Even a helpline. Helplines can be great for this kind of thing. Just to chat to someone who is willing to just listen and give you the space that you need. However, most of the time, these emotions don't linger forever, right? I recently went through this experience on a retreat where I felt into my brokenness, and that was a big, dark emotion for me. And they gave us 3 minutes to feel into this feeling. And I thought I was going to take the whole 3 minutes to cry my eyes out because that's how my brokenness wanted to express itself in that moment. And interestingly enough, after 1.5 minutes of hysterically crying, I was like, I feel it lessen. I feel it lessen. And I checked in and I was like, do I still need to keep hysterically crying? And the answer was like, no, it's okay. We've had our moment. We've felt what demanded to be felt. And now it's about self-soothing. Now it's about coming back home to self. It's okay. That part of us has been released and we can move through it. So you want to get good at the dance of moving through emotions and self-soothing yourself. If you can, one, feel your emotions, and two, self-soothe, you are going to be able to hold yourself against anything that comes up in your life. So you want to get really good at those two things. And by self-soothe, what I mean is, so when we have that that safety blanket of that person we can call to go, help me, I'm upset. What that person is doing is they're just being a loving, supportive friend or family member and reminding you, that you are a good person, that these thoughts aren't necessarily true, that even if you made a mistake, it's okay because, you're going to try again and you're going to maybe do it differently next time. And you're human and humans make mistakes. Like, it's just being able to give yourself the gift of compassion in your darkest moment is self-soothing, and be able to just like hold yourself in that space and go that I've got you and I'm not going anywhere. Self-love is a big component here in this work. I would call that compassion self-love, right? It's the ability to be able to be there when you are in your darkest moment and essentially parent yourself, reparent yourself, and give yourself the love and support that a good parent would give you. And maybe you've never had that, and maybe that's really hard for you to nail down, but just treat yourself as you would your best friend. That's a good way to start. Often we are so kind to our friends, to our family, to our lovers. We are so good at being there for everyone else. But when it comes to us, our inner critic gets in the way, and we are so good at being hard on ourselves. But what I want you to do is be able to just love on yourself when you are going through those dark times, which might mean fighting the thoughts. I'm a worthless human being. No, you're not. I promise you, you're not. And we're going to find a way that you feel worthy again. Just those little things. But it can be really hard when you have a lot of self-hate and you haven't done the self-love journey to be able to be that positive parent without feeling like it's fake. So there's a lot of moving parts in this. It seems basic, feel the feelings, self-soothe, but, or as always with all of our things we traverse, our conditioning, our belief systems, the way we've been taught as children, the way we've been punished as children, the judgments we hold on ourselves and others will always come up and rear its ugly head. And it's how you deal with that. That means how well you get out of this space quicker, right? Every breakup is a chance for you to see what's going on beneath the surface of your subconscious, because these things will come up. Whereas when you're traveling along, happily in relationship, everything's fine, you're not going to notice these parts of you. They're not going to be as readily available. And they are just parts of you. They're just pieces of you that exist, that have split off from the main part of you because they've been suppressed or because they've not been valued and or acknowledged, and that's okay. But the aim of all of this work and parts integration work, if you've heard of it, is to sit with that part of yourself, love on it, nurture it, hear it out, see what is it trying to keep me safe? What is it trying to do here? What is the highest intention of this part of me? Yeah, it might be telling me I'm worthless, but why is it telling me that? Because we're afraid of rejection, or because, we're trying to protect ourselves from ever being hurt again or heartbroken again. And you want to love on that part of you, listen to it, hear it out, and be like, okay, how can we move forward with this now? And reintegrate it back into self. So the way I see it is when trauma happens to a person, those parts of us split off. So for example, when I was younger, I got really hurt in a relationship, and I was being really led by the part of myself that was very curious and, saw the best in people and just loved on people for no reason. And so she led us down a path where we got hurt by someone really badly. And these different parts of ourselves will drive our ship, right? If you think of it as like a steering the ship situation. And then after that scenario, when we got really hurt because we were following her lead, it pretty much said like, no, you're not running the ship anymore. You are too trusting. You are too nice. You are the problem that this trauma has happened. So therefore we're going to shut that part down. And we're going to bring in this defensiveness part who's going to look for red flags at every possible opportunity to try and protect us. And she got suppressed for years. And it wasn't until years later that I got encouraged to connect back with that part of myself that I was like, oh shit, wow. I have this part of myself that's just beautifully curious and open and just wants to love people. But she feels so much shame for like what happened to her. And I just need to love on her for a minute and be like, you made a mistake. Like, it's okay. And we still love you anyway. And you are welcome to become part of the fold. And my propensity for love, my propensity for joy, my propensity for lightness and playfulness comes back online, right? Because that's the thing with all this work. Why are we doing all this work? Why are we feeling all the emotions when we could just be distracting ourselves and that feels way better? We're doing it because the deeper you can go into the dark parts is also the deeper you will bounce back up and be able to feel the light parts, the joy, the peace, the pleasure again. When we are suppressing so much of ourselves, we also are suppressing our parts of ourselves that call in joy because our heart is so full of the heaviness. There is no room for the joy or the pleasure or the fun because we're just so caught up in our wounds of like, I don't trust that person. They're going to hurt me like everyone else hurt me. And I'm just suppressing all this emotion. So that's the only thing that's running through my head right now. That's what feels really true for me. Like there is nothing else. There is no trust. And we're suppressing it. So subconsciously it's going to bubble back up like that balloon, like that beach ball. An example of this is I recently did an improv workshop. And weirdly, like, so improv is like you just jump in and do something random and it's like so unscripted and you just have to roll with the punches of the scenario. And it's interesting because it's so random, like it's almost like the mind goes a bit offline. And I feel like this is where my subconscious parts were coming up and taking control of the ship. And there was this part of me that kept like bringing up death and like there was one part where I was like an 87-year-old and I was like, I just want to die. And I was like, whoa, where did that come from? And then it came up again in the second round as well. And it's weird because consciously that thought doesn't really occur to me at the moment. Like it's just not something that I'm thinking about. But when I went into that brokenness part later on in the day, she was feeling like I've been so suppressed and no one wants to listen to me. And there's this part of me that when that happens, like I don't want to be around anymore. And so she was jumping in and taking control of the ship during that improv skit. And I was like, why can't I just be funny? Like, why does this have to be so dark? And like, why does this come up in multiple different improv skits where it's like, it's not even a thing, but then I've made it a thing because it keeps popping up? Because she was finding her beach ball moment to pop back up and remind me she was there and that this emotion was there. And even though it wasn't conscious, there was subconsciously something going on beneath the surface. And I needed to help work with her and love on her and heal that brokenness so that that piece of me wasn't as presently felt anymore. And so that's just an example of how this stuff can pop back up in weird and wacky ways. Your subconscious mind is an interesting beast. Heartbreak can also be a redirection. I think it's really hard to think of it in this way when we're going through it and when it still really hurts and it's so much pain. And my heart goes out to all of you because I know what that feels like and I know how deep and dark it can be sometimes. And there is this part of us, especially when this stuff comes suddenly, that is just like, what the hell just happened? Like, I'm still in denial. Like, why did it have to be this way? Why couldn't it been different? And again, stages of grief, right? Like, maybe they'll come back to me. Maybe we'll get back together again. Maybe this is just a moment, a blip in time, and it'll all be fine next week or next month. If I keep holding the hope for things to change, sometimes rejection is redirection. Sometimes the person in front of us, if they don't want us anymore, it's bigger than just between the two of you. Sometimes it's the universe realigning things so that they work better. And I know that's probably not what you want to hear. And I know how hard that can be to listen to when you are in that denial or that like, fuck this. It's meant to be this way and it shouldn't have been this way. And I feel so slighted. And so, like the injustice in me is freaking out right now. It's like, it's not fair. It's not fair. It's not fair. Maybe there's a universe where you two being apart is the best thing for you. And I just want you to sit with that for a minute because I know it's hard and it's not an easy pill to swallow. But that's the thing. We can't see the future. We can only see what we think is the future. And we think everything's going to be great with this person, but you just don't know. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what the next steps are going to be in each of your lives. Like, and sometimes the universe has a bigger plan for us. And it's like literally that simple. Like, it can just be like, maybe the next person you love doesn't make you work as hard for their love as the first person did. Maybe the next person you love just gets it, just gets you a lot simpler. Maybe this heartbreak becomes your fucking trajectory for becoming a way greater version of self. So you play with those emotions, you feel them, you integrate them, you self-soothe yourself, and you become so powerful within that you can conquer anything. Grief and loss was my introduction to like, here is your fucking darkest moment. Here is your worst. Can you handle that? Yes, I can. I learned how to handle that. Well, you know what? Now I'm fearless because I know I can handle anything. I can handle my worst day. I survived that and I survived the worst day. So therefore, I can survive a shitty day. I can survive an average day. I can survive doing something that terrifies me, but I know is for my greatest good, like getting up on stage and speaking a poem, that I wrote or something like that. It gives us this new power within ourselves when we transmute this stuff, when we don't avoid it, when we don't ignore it. We become stronger, more powerful versions of self. And then that person who you become walks out into the world, and that person loves themselves more. That person knows how to hold space for themselves. And so, therefore, you become less dependent on your partner, right? So, it's less about, I need you to help me because I'm feeling so depressed right now. And it's more about, you know what? That heartbreak taught me how to heal my wounds when I'm just like so sad and lonely. So, I don't need to beg my partner to give that to me anymore. I can still ask and say, hey, I'm having a rough day. Can I have a hug or can we like talk it through? But it's like if your partner turns around and says, I really don't have space for that right now. I don't have capacity. I'm really busy, or I need to go here. I need to do that. Like it's not devastating and life threatening for you anymore. It's like, oh, they can't hold space for me today. That's okay because I know how to hold space for myself. It makes you almost indestructible, right? Like you might get rejected at a party by some person and it's like, you know what, this sucks, but I've sat with rejection before. I've sat with my abandonment wounds before, and I know that I can pull myself out of that. I know that I can survive that. And even though this sucks, it's okay. And I'm going to move forward and I'm going to go back to the party and I'm going to have a great time and maybe someone else will show up. And it allows us to shift our vibration to this state of like, you know what? If it doesn't work out, I'm going to be okay because I've seen my worst day and I've survived. And that gives you power because that means you're not at the whims of the external world anymore. You're not at the whims of a dating app if you don't meet anyone, or you do meet people and they're just not great and they keep rejecting you or treating you terribly. It's like, you know what? I don't need this because I'm not looking for that validation. I'm not looking for that love and support like I used to. I am so happy to just go be on my own for a bit because I learned how to be single and do that well. And I'm used to that now. And it's going to take a damn good person to step into my life and be my partner because I know my worth and I know my value. And I'm not just going to accept anyone because they're a fun distraction for me to get over my heartbreak. I'm going to accept the best. And this is where you raise your vibration, and then you're on a different playing field than what you were before that heartbreak. You're a completely different person. You might look the same, but deep down, your heart is changed. And that means that you can attract more love into your life. That means you can attract someone who has also done their inner work. So you don't have to look after them all the time. And maybe they're no longer avoiding their emotions, just like you're no longer avoiding your emotions. So you become more balanced, calm, peaceful people. And you'll still have conflict. It still exists, even in the most healthiest dynamics, but it'll be a different kind of conflict that isn't so soul crushing. You'll be meeting people who've done their own work and therefore can hold space for you in your deep, dark emotions because they've also held space for their own deep, dark emotions. Like, this is why they say to love yourself first before going into a relationship, is because when you have that key in that lock, then you also attract someone who loves themselves too. And they're not working from their wounds and their triggers. They're not so embedded in their not feeling good enough that they accidentally wound you all the time to remind themselves of that wound, that they're not good enough, as a way for that wound to be cleared and healed. they've already done the work. They've already worked on their not good enough wound. They've already worked on their being alone. So it's a different relationship. It's one where you're like, you know what? I've got me and I'm going to be here for you, but I don't need your support. It's not life or death or like breathing for me anymore. It's manageable. That anxious attachment, that avoidant attachment is more manageable now. I've become more secure because I've learned to hold myself. It's true power. And I wish that for you, listener, whoever's on the end of this line. I wish that for you because that is a place of peace. And that is a place of creating sacred unions without as much karmic wounding that is hurting us and holding us back and holding us in these projection patterns where we're projecting our wounds onto someone else and someone else is not holding space for that. And then we're getting more wounded by that. And then they're getting wounded because we're getting wounded. And it just ends up on this roller coaster of pain. Heartbreak can be the making of you. It can be the becoming of you. And I want you to know that. And I want you to know you are so capable of this quantum leap and this jump into the next life, into the next iteration of self, where you are stronger, you are safer, you are happier, you are more connected to your joy space. It is all within grasp. But all you got to do is sit with the uncomfortable emotion, feel into the darkness, come through the other side, and then find the light again. I love you so much. It's going to be okay. And just on that, if you are struggling with that self-love piece of being able to sit with the wounds, of being able to self-soothe, I'm running a workshop in February on self-love. It's going to be a day container where we're going to hold space for ourselves and our inner child and see what lands and what comes up. And my hope is out of that workshop, people have a roadmap of where they can start with their self-love journey or where they're up to with their self-love journey and what the next steps are, what the next pieces are for them to integrate so that they can come back to self, come back to wholeness, come back to love, come back to feeling comfortable being single and just loving on yourself and being so fine with whatever happens that it just magnetizes great things to you. And you are so welcome. Come spend Valentine's Day with me if you've got no one else. All right. Thank you so much for listening. And as always, much love, Kiara Jade. Bye.